The Washington Post editorial board wrote just a pathetic hatchet job article on Bernie Sanders. I want to break it down for you here. And I mean, in all seriousness, if I could probably spend 30 minutes on this, an hour on this, because virtually every single claim that they make is false. But I'll try to, condense this as much as possible and try to squeeze in as much information as possible. So here's what they say. Senator Bernie Sanders is leading in New Hampshire and within striking distance in Iowa, in large part because he is playing the role of uncorrupted anti-establishment crusader. But Mr. Sanders is not a brave truth teller. He is a politician selling his own brand of fiction to a slice of the country that eagerly wants to buy it. Now, already I'm like, huh? How the fuck do you know what's going on inside his head, dude? It's fiction! He's just a politician peddling stuff that people want to hear on the left. Or he really believes it, and for the record, he has a track record of fighting for these things. I don't think you can question Bernie Sanders' sincerity. I think he's demonstrated that he is indeed sincere. I mean, how many decades has he spent in public office? And they just brush that aside. He's playing the role of an uncorrupted anti-establishment crusader. Except, wait, is he or is he not taking big money? Does he or does he not have a super PAC? Please, go ahead, answer that question. And then when you answer that question and it's not the one that you assumed, please come out and apologize. But I know that's not going to happen. Of course not. So, yeah, he's peddling fiction. Please proceed. They say, Mr. Sanders' tale starts with the bad guys, Wall Street and corporate money. Yeah, I know, because they're not bad guys, right? The existence of large banks and lax campaign finance laws explains why working Americans are not thriving, he says, and why the progressive agenda has not advanced. Here's a reality check. Wall Street has already undergone a round of reform, significantly reducing the risks big banks pose to the financial system. Okay, that is not even close to true, and you know who else disagrees with that? The Washington Post editorial board. David Sirota was talking about this earlier from the International Business Times. He tweeted out a picture of one of their op-eds where it said, we need to break up the big banks. And then Bernie Sanders calls for breaking up the big banks. Like, what are you doing? We already did sufficient regulation of Wall Street. We already did a strong reform already. But wait, you just said that we didn't. Now you're saying that we did? Well, when it's in the context of attacking Bernie, sure, then you say it. So even disagreeing with yourself to be anti-Bernie. And what are they referring to, by the way? The only thing I could think of, obviously they don't say it. How convenient. They leave out exactly what they're referring to. But they're talking about Dodd-Frank, most likely. To say Dodd-Frank is reform that significantly reduces the risk that big banks pose to the financial system, that's just bullshit. I mean, we know we've covered endless stories on it. There were a tremendous amount of loopholes in Dodd-Frank to begin with, and then since it's been implemented, all the time, Republicans are sneaking in provisions to dismantle it, almost on a monthly basis. And President Obama, by the way, is not vetoing those pieces of legislation, because the trick is you go into must-pass bills and you slip in these anti-Dodd-Frank pieces of legislation, and then you basically get back to the exact same point you were at before, where you let Wall Street do whatever the hell they want, and they will, yet again, crash the economy. So what you're arguing, what your point is, it's not accurate. You're simply wrong. I don't know how else to put it. They continue. And even with radical campaign finance reform, many Americans and their representatives would still oppose the Sanders agenda. But the overwhelming majority are in favor of it. Do you do any research before you write pompous, shitty articles like this? Like, they just assert it. People are still going to oppose it. Of course, people are going to oppose it. But if you compare Bernie Sanders' agenda to every other politician running, every other candidate in the race, Republican or Democrat, he has overwhelming support. Go issue by issue like an adult, and you'll find out very quickly. I don't know, are there any areas, maybe 2, 3 max areas where the American people disagree with him? He has the most overwhelmingly popular agenda if you did any research or if you cared to be honest and open about this and accurate, you would admit that, but you don't. They say, Mr. Sanders' story continues with fantastical claims about how he would make the European social model work in the United States. He admits that he would have to raise taxes on the middle class in order to pay for his universal Medicare for All healthcare plan, and he promises massive savings on healthcare costs that would translate into generous benefits for ordinary people, putting them well ahead on net. But he does not adequately explain where those massive savings would come from. Okay. Yet again, this is also not true, and I don't think you even bothered to look up to see if it was true, because Gerald Friedman, who's an economist, and his analysis was used to smear Bernie in the Wall Street Journal, where they pretended like his plans would cost $18 trillion or some ridiculous made-up number. This guy came out and said, whoa, in an open letter to the Wall Street Journal, you guys, that's not what I said. In fact, what I said is his plan would save us $5 trillion. They continue to make stuff up. Getting rid of corporate advertising and overhead would only yield so much. Savings would also have to come from slashing payments to doctors and hospitals and denying benefits that people want. Yet again, Makeupsville. If you were to go up to Bernie Sanders and say, hey, Bernie, are you going to slash payments to doctors and hospitals and deny benefits to people? Does anybody think he'd say, yes, that's exactly what my plan is? Well, you know, Europe, rationing healthcare, all these problems. No. Have you spoken to anybody who actually lives in these countries? What they say is things that are elective procedures, you might have to wait a little bit. Things that are necessary, you get them immediately. And for them to bring this up and not tell you the situation that already exists in the U.S., we're already rationing care, you idiot. We're just doing it to the people who make the most money. They get to choose, and poor people and middle-class people are fucksville across the board. 45,000 people die every year in the United States of America because they don't have access to basic health care. Millions of people are uninsured. This idea that rationing care, God, for people might die and they won't have the access to health care if we go with Bernie Sanders' plan. That's what we have right now. 45,000 people die every year because they don't have access. How many people die every year in Canada because they don't have access to health care? I can't hear you. You want to know why? Because the answer is fucking zero. How about in France? Oh, socialized medicine. 0 people. 0 people die because they don't have access to basic health care. Britain? 0. Australia? 0. This is what he means when he says it's a right and not a privilege. In the U.S., we have a system where 45,000 people die, and these idiots smugly write, rationing care, he's going to have to ration care. And we're rationing it right now, and you don't even talk about it. You don't even talk about the fact that we have real death panels in the United States of America. You know what the death panels are? The insurance companies, the for-profit insurance companies. And by nature of the way the system works, the best way for the insurance companies to make more money is to deny more care. So gotta pad the bottom line. You have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders. This is how capitalism and a for-profit model works. You gotta do it. So whoops, I guess we're not gonna fund your cancer treatment. Our bad / we really don't give a fuck because our CEOs got yachts and mansions and whatnot. But socialized medicine, be afraid, even though they pay less for better outcomes and get better health care. Convenient facts missing from this shitty article. And then when they make the point about, tell us more about European social democracy and the slow growth that they've had there. Do you know nothing about economics? To the extent that they do have slow growth, it's caused by the austerity that they did after the Great Recession. That's what caused it. So if they did stimulus spending, they would be in a better position. So it's just economic know-nothings, healthcare know-nothings. Just having verbal diarrhea, or not verbal diarrhea, diarrhea of the pen to attack Bernie Sanders, flinging mud. Guys, I got no problem with substantive criticism against him. Fuck, I've told you guys, I have problems with some of Bernie Sanders' policies. When it comes to minimum wage, he wants $15 across the board chain it to inflation. I'm in favor of, at a federal level, at a national level, passing legislation that says a living wage in each state and tie it to inflation. So as I've said before, in Kentucky, that might be $9.72. But in New York, that could be $21 or $22 an hour, and then you tie it to inflation. That's my perfect policy solution. He is not in favor of that. So I disagree with him on that. I want to legalize gambling and prostitution and legalize, tax, and regulate all drugs. He doesn't agree with that. So we can have that discussion, or I can write a piece explaining why I disagree. Now, I get that it's politically difficult for him to argue for these things for a variety of reasons, but that's a reasonable discussion. This is not reasonable. This is a bunch of idiots making arguments that are like baboon arguments. You're just not well-researched. You're just not making sense. And finally, I'm going to give you one more here. They say, Mr. Sanders assures Democrats concerned about the political obstacles in the way of his agenda that he will lead a political revolution that will help him clear the Capitol of corruption and influence peddling. This self-regarding analysis implies a national consensus favoring his agenda when there is none, and ignores the many legitimate checks and balances in the political system that he cannot wish away. So here we go. This is the core of their argument. Be a good little Democrat. And a good little Democrat is a centrist at best, corporatist, pro-establishment shill. A good little Democrat is Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Bill Clinton. That's as far left as you can go. Sure, you're centrist / maybe center-right and corporatist and establishment, but come on, don't get too crazy here. We have checks and balances. Don't be aggressive. Don't really try to get your agenda through, and don't pretend like you have a consensus. Wait. But again, you're disregarding the fact that issue by issue, his agenda is overwhelmingly supported by the American people. Overwhelmingly supported. More so than any other candidate. So he has more of a consensus than anybody else in the race. But they just brush that aside. And they also, don't even know what the fuck he means when he says a political revolution. For people who are political junkies, okay, and they really follow this stuff, when he says a political revolution, and he's talking about corruption, influence peddling, Wall Street, big money donors. What's he talking about? We need a political revolution. To do what? Get the money out of politics. And, when they mock the idea of, he just falls back to that and defaults to that and says, political revolution when he can't answer the question. No. That's his way of saying, if we have to, we're going to go around Congress. If we have to, we're going to get a constitutional amendment going state by state, which is something that we're able to do because of the Constitution, which if these morons fucking knew about, they wouldn't embarrass themselves and make shitty arguments like this against Bernie when Bernie's crystal clear in what he's saying. They're getting nervous. That's why they're doing this. There was another hit piece from Jonathan Chait in New York Magazine. Made similar arguments. He's like, the problem with Bernie is that he just assumes that conservatism is a cover for doing bribery and corporate interests. Do you know nothing about politics? The whole point of the Republican Party is to sell out to big money interests and pass legislation that's in favor of them. That's not my opinion. I'm going by their voting record, dipshit. You're apparently not doing that. So they try to pretend like that's not what's happening, or they try to say that, hey, it's unrealistic. People don't want it anyway, even though even over 80% of Republicans say, we got to get the money out of the political system. We got to do it. Big money is too big of a problem. So he does have a consensus. He does have people with him. And they're like, no, there's no consensus for this political revolution. And he's ignoring the legitimate checks and balances. No, what he's going to do is actually use the system the proper way to fight for what he wants. A guy named FDR did this. A guy named LBJ in many respects did this as well, where if they ran into a speed bump, instead of buckling like a bitch like Obama does, what they do is they know how to play politics. So you call somebody into your office, for example, in the Obamacare debate, they said we couldn't get even a public option because some of the blue dog Democrats were against us. Oh, that's interesting. So you know what you do if you're a politician who really wants single payer or a public option and you're not bought by corporate interests as Obama was? What you do is you call them in your office, you say, sit down, I got to talk to you real fast. So here's the deal. You're going to vote for this legislation for a single payer or public option, whatever. And if you don't, your political career is over. Then you say, what do you mean? I don't know. No, see, I will go campaign for whoever your primary opponents. We're going to primary you. I'm going to campaign for your primary opponent. And myself and the DNC, we're going to pour a tremendous amount of money into that race, and I can guarantee you're going to get your fucking ass handed to you. And money wins elections over 90% of the time when it comes to Congress. Go ahead, vote against it. I dare you to vote against it. And then you know what happens? They vote for it. How do I know this? This is politics 101. If you really want to get something done, this is what you do. You fucking crack skulls. But Obama doesn't do that. The Democrats of today don't do that. Why? Because they're centrist, corporatist, pro-establishment shills. And then people defend them like the idiots at the Washington Post and at the New York Times were like, that's the best we could have done is get a half measure. And then if there's a real Democrat who comes along roaring saying, I'm going to get shit done, you go, oh no, there's no consensus. There's no political revolution. Look away, checks and balances. You don't know how the system works. No, you don't know how the system works. Now step the fuck aside and feel the burn.